everyone, and welcome to Super Podcast Action Committee, episode 155. Andrew Eisen here, along with E. Zachary Knight. Hello, Zachary.
Hello, everybody.
Managing editor of Game Politics, James Fudge is here.
Hello.
We have Brad Lasgow, who has been on our show once or twice now. He wrote our, what was the name of it? Challenge Accepted, how to interview an internet hashtag that got some traction. Hi, Brad.
Hey, guys.
And returning is Chuck Norris lookalike Michael Koretzky.
It's Chuck Norris from here up, and it's Woody Allen from here down.
Nice.
All right. So, today's topic is Gamergate, not Gamergate, SPJ AirPlay. Boy, I'm off to a good start. So, it happened last week, and the poll is still open because I forgot to close it, so let me close it real quick. It finally happened. It was, what, 4 months in the making, Michael?
4 years? I don't know. No, it's exactly 3 months tomorrow.
3 months, okay.
Well, 3 months since we started the site. I guess I wrote that in May, the first thing about Gamergate, so May 4th to whatever today is.
Okay. All right, so let's just kick it off with our weekly poll, which asked, other than the bomb threats, was SPJ AirPlay a success? We had 195 people reply. 68% said yes, we need more of those. 4% said yes, but one was enough. 12% said no, but it's worth trying again. And 17% said no, and never do that again. So it seems like the majority of the folks who responded to our poll, at least, seem to think SPJ AirPlay was a success, and events like that should continue. Michael, what are your broad impressions of how, again, other than the damn bomb threats, which closed the show prematurely, how do you think it went?
I thought it was awesome. I thought the bomb threat was great. That was like the best possible bomb threat.
Well, I did get a good image out of it with your "Are you not entertained?" pose, which we had on which we used for our recap.
Yeah.
No, but it was the dumbest. Like, I don't know if I should be encouraging this, but like that was the dumbest way to do a bomb threat. I mean, why would you do a bomb threat and say it's going to go off 15 minutes before the end of the event? That's like. There were other bomb threats, but the most serious bomb threat came at the end of the day. The thing was going to be over in half an hour, so it was a great way to get publicity, and that's just a really lazy bomb threader.
So maybe the threator wanted to issue a bomb threat, but didn't really want to interrupt or inconvenience the show. It's like, I kind of want to see this, but you know, I've got to be an ass about it.
Now, here's my my very negative take on this whole the bomb threat. Now, you say it was the bomb threat was called in. They said the bomb was going to go off 15 minutes before the show was over. Now, my theory is that if this bomb threat was actually called in by Gamergate, they did that so that the show would be almost over. So Gamergate would get its message across, but then they would look good because people are threatening them, and there at the end, they get the bomb threat. That's a little theory that I like to toss around. I'm not totally serious with it or anything, but to me that just seems like a logical way to do it. It's like, what's better than an assassinated leader? Somebody who has attempted to be assassinated. So
you're going to be very popular on Twitter this week, Zachary.
Yes, I am.
I can feel it.
Yeah.
Hal's in the chat box asking how long ago did this start? Like 2 minutes ago, so you haven't missed anything.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard of any arrests or anything, so that sucks.
They're probably not going to get any. So
they never do. It's annoying.
No, the bomb threat was probably, what it usually is, just trolls getting involved to have some fun.
Yeah, that's really fun. It's hilarious. Yeah, that is the thing is, I guess you just can't take that chance. But bomb people who actually blow things up typically don't, from what I've noticed anyway, typically don't announce it beforehand. They just go blow stuff up. So that's not to say we shouldn't take this stuff seriously, because there's a lot of people in there. Better be safe than sorry. But damn bomb threats. Okay, so what you thought the event went pretty well.
Well, I thought that I mean, I watched some of your podcasts from last week, and I don't remember which one of you said you weren't sure it was going to have any lingering effect, and so I don't know what you're judging it by, but to me, as a journalist, I never expect any one thing to have an effect. Very rarely do stories have an immediate, noticeable impact, and those are the stories that win Pulitzer Prizes, and I've never won a Pulitzer Prize and never will. So more often the stories start conversations that change something. I don't know how many of your listeners or even gamers know, Gamergate is kind of named after Watergate, and I think people vaguely know that Watergate in the 70s forced a U.S. president to resign. I don't think they know that the reporters that worked on that story that won the Pulitzer Prize, they never wrote one big story. They wrote lots of little stories for 2 years before anything happened. And in those 2 years, they would write stories and other people would start to talk. So that first it was just the Washington Post, and then the New York Times and CBS News, and then people just started talking about it, around the water cooler when there were those things. So to me, AirPlay is not going to be a success for a little while until other things start to happen. I know that one guy emailed me that he wants to do another one on his own. Is Aaron Pablone, I think I'm pronouncing his last name right. When we had the bomb threat, what I liked about the bomb threat was the cordoned off area that the cops set up was right next to a foreclosed house that had no trespassing signs all over it. It was empty. So we just took about half the speakers and a third of the audience and continued the debate inside the carport of the condemned house. The cops were looking right at us, but I think the logic was that, it's illegal to issue a bomb threat, it's illegal to sit in a condemned house, and we just, two wrongs make a right, and we just continued the conversation. And I had to go talk to the TV reporters because I figured, especially after the morning session where everyone had trouble explaining what Gamergate was, I would give my crack at it to Telemundo, which is the Spanish broadcasters that were like, "¿Qué?" So I tried to explain stuff to them, and then Aaron Pablone took over the question and answering, and everyone seemed to be happy. He wants to do another one of these things on his own. I think, from what I understand, Lumbakari wants to do another stream. He's going to kind of lasso in Lynn Walsh from SPJ. So if there are just more conversations that happen, then that's great. One of your readers, I was reading one of your comments, called AirPlay an illuminating failure, and I'll take that any day.
There we go. None of the post conversation was aired. How did that go? Anything interesting come of it?
Yeah, actually, someone posted it. There's a couple of versions floating around.
Oh, like on cell phone footage and stuff?
Well, actually, there were a couple of other people there filming it for whatever purposes they had. They had nice professional equipment, so
sweet.
They filmed it. I don't know if they put that stuff up yet, but I watched some of the footage, and it was cool. I mean, it was just more, detailed conversations about journalists and gamers.
Okay. So, let's see. AirPlay was not covered very much. Any thoughts on what was covered mostly was the bomb threat. There was I saw very little coverage of AirPlay itself. Do you think that's because this is one of the first major conversations that Gamergate has had, because this is the beginning, or do you think there's no interest? What are your thoughts on that?
I think for the mainstream media, coverage is going to come slowly. It's going to be incremental. So I didn't expect a lot of mainstream journalists to start covering it right away if there was not a bomb threat. I was kind of surprised about the way the gaming press covered it.
Or
after talking to what?
Or didn't cover it?
Yeah, that kind of perplexed me. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because some people are commenting, "Oh, you're butthurt because I didn't cover your little event." I don't think they understand. I'm not doing another one, and I have nothing. My career isn't personally invested in it, and it was my spare time. So, I don't really care in a greedy way. I care because it's very perplexing after doing this for 3 months, talking to a lot of game journalists, and noticing that it's not getting covered. I know as a journalist, I know a lot of what I don't know. I've no shortage of people telling me what I don't know the past few months. I know journalism, and I know that the lack of coverage is intentional, and it kind of irks me.
Do you think that lack of coverage stems from the enthusiast press having long since made up its mind about whether Gamergate is something worth their time to cover, or do you think it's something else?
Look, I mean, all the excuses, one of the excuses, which is totally real, is that when you write about Gamergate, it doesn't matter what you say, you're going to get buried in emails and tweets and everything else. But so what? That's your job. You don't change news coverage because you don't like or do like the people you're covering. So that's not an excuse. I think the next thing I want to do, because I've been talking to games journalists, and you were talking about this last week, Andrew, about how much journalism experience you do or don't have, which is fine. But the people running the publications, they should at least learn that stuff. And I think it's pretty clear that some of the gaming press is letting their opinions get to them. And maybe it's because they're not journalists, but I would have been much happier with a bunch of stories in the gaming press saying AirPlay was stupid, Koretzky is ugly, and Gamergate is a bunch of harassing, misogynist assholes, than to say nothing, because saying nothing says a hell of a lot.
You're a handsome individual. Don't worry about it.
My wife agrees.
All right.
So one of the things that gets pointed out quite frequently is who participated at AirPlay and who did not. There were no game journalists there. Do you think there should have been, or do you think at this particular event you were better off without them? What are your thoughts on that?
I would have liked to have one or two there for the morning panel to talk with Lynn and Ren, two professional journalists and journalism experts, because I would have liked to know a little more about how their operations work. But I also know this, in talking to games journalists off the record, it's not unusual that the people writing the stories don't necessarily, this is true in all journalism, but it might be especially true here, that the reporters don't always agree with their editors. Like, not in, like, oh, you changed my beautiful prose, but in, I don't like your philosophy of covering stuff. I'm not sure if we would have had other journalists from the gaming press there, that would have helped. We would have needed the editor of Polygon. We would have needed the editor of Kotaku. We would have needed those kind of people there so that they could speak as the boss. So without the bosses there, it doesn't matter. And in trying to talk to the bosses, or actually talking to the bosses and having them tell me lots of good stuff, even in their own defense, but off the record, and I can't tell you what that is, doesn't matter. So actually it worked out okay, because the examples that we went over, which were, you kind of broke them down last week, and they were kind of maybe a little unusual for Gamergate to float those particular examples out there in the order that they wanted to. But I think there were still some valuable lessons learned that were bigger than the actual examples themselves.
Okay. James, I know you have some questions. Lead off with one.
Okay, well, what we'll do is I'll ask one and then Brad can ask one, I guess, because they're different. But I just want to say where these are from so people know. They're basically from 3 people on Twitter who are they're kind of against ethics only. So their names are Barlow, Ethics Suck, and a guy named John Kelly. So, okay, well, I have like 5 of them, and You can take as much time as you want to answer these. So here's the first one. Why did Koretzky refuse to allow former members of Gamergate from participating as anti-Gamergate at AirPlay?
Well, this is going to start off really anticlimactically because I don't know what he means. So I guess it may be referencing that I got a lot of tweets and some emails. Once I talked to the people that were known anti-Gamergate people, and they refused, and one of them told me there was indeed a boycott, that some of them had talked amongst themselves and all agreed we're just not going to go there. A bunch of people tweeted at me and said, I'll go as anti-Gamergate because I hate those fuckers. And, you know, I'm like, well, I don't know who you are. And this gets back to the whole question of this whole AirPlay event, which is I don't know who you are. I don't know how to vet you as anti-Gamergate. Send me some links to some stuff you've written. I just tweet a lot. If you really track me down on 8chan and Reddit, you'll see that I have said some bad things about Gamergate. I'm like, dude, you know, I'm sorry. I mean, that doesn't cut it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, journalistically, it doesn't cut it. I wouldn't write about you, so I'm certainly not going to, you know, pay for you to come down to Miami in the middle of summer and sit on the stage. So I don't know who you are. So that's the answer. If that was indeed the question, I might be answering the wrong question.
No, that's a good answer.
Yeah,
Brad?
definitely.
Okay, I went to Kotaku in Action and the Against Gamergate subreddits and collected some questions from them. Let's see, which one will I pick? Well, the most common one on Kotaku in Action was asking if you're interested in doing more panels, perhaps in streams with Sargon and others.
Yeah, I've been asked that. I didn't know what an eCeleb was until 3 months ago, and I really don't want to be one of those. So I don't want to do another Gamergate AirPlay debate where I'm the moderator standing in front of people. I would like to help other people do some of that stuff. I have some other things that if I'm going to stay active in gaming journalism, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes things to do if we're going to set up an awards program, if we're going to try to put together some resources for journalists. I'm not a broadcaster, so there are better people like Andrew has a better voice than I do. Let him do it. But I don't want to do another AirPlay for Gamergate. What did come up, which I'm sure will be some questions today, is given everything that happened with the afternoon panel, I told Milo, listen, if you want to do a whole separate, I kind of said it tongue-in-cheek at first, but this is, I guess, how it all starts. I said, if you want to do a whole feminist version of AirPlay, just feminism in the media, we could do that. He's like, okay, great. So, and I've already emailed one noted feminist because we were talking about AirPlay. I would love to do something like that, where if the debate is going to be the media and blank, that's awesome. I don't know that I need to do anything else in front of a camera with Gamergate. But I would go on a stream because my whole thing is I will answer any questions anytime. So this or anything else, I will always try to answer any questions the best I can.
All right. I should note for the record that these three fellows and other people do not like Sargon at all. They think he's the devil. So just so you know that. Not everybody likes Sargon.
He makes one hell of a potato salad, though. You've got to give him that.
Sure. Okay.
I don't understand that cultural reference at all. But of course, I didn't get the whole spaghetti thing until I was into this for like 2 weeks. And I was like, what's with the spaghetti? So, yeah, your food references I don't understand.
Okay, here's another question from these three guys. How much sway did Alum, you know who I'm talking about, Bakari, and by extension Breitbart have over the event?
Well, I guess they might have had a lot of impact in helping select the speakers. I relied on Alum he was the guy that kind of the emergent leadership of the Gamergate panel to coordinate all of the Gamergate stuff. So my whole thing was I wanted as little to do with the Gamergate panelists as possible, just to have plausible deniability. So Alum is pretty good at organizing stuff. So like when they're going to show up at the hotel and how you're going to get them from the airport to the hotel and from the hotel to the venue. That was largely him and John Smith, which is one of the Gamergate committee people. Alum, I talked to him about getting the 5 examples of ethical violations from his morning panelists, giving them to me. But the question seems to be a lot more loaded than that, so I don't know what some of the rumors might be about, some of the Zachary-like rumors that are conspiracy theories that might be involved in that question. If someone can articulate that, I could address it.
All of these questions are loaded. Okay? So any question that I put to you is going to be loaded.
All right, cool. That's more fun.
All right. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay. This is from Anti-Gamergate. This is from Still Mostly Clueless. You said that the aim of AirPlay was to work out what Gamergate stands for. Did you work that out? And if so, what do they stand for?
Well, no, did I say that? If I said that, okay. Well, I thought what it said on the website and what I've been saying is that I wanted to see if we could come up with a definition for Gamergate. I wanted to see if we could judge how the gaming press itself is doing ethically covering Gamergate, and I wanted to see the mainstream media could do a better job covering online-only movements. So those are the 3 questions that I wanted answers.
Well, let's go with. Did you come up with a definition? A suitable definition for you?
Hell no. I mean, one overall definition. The most interesting experiment was during the bomb threat, trying to talk to the local TV stations that came out to cover the bomb threat, because local TV, they have the shortest attention spans of any set of journalists. I mean, your local broadcast is only 20 minutes long, really, and any story is 30 seconds. So you know that they have the most ADD of any journalist. So trying to explain Gamergate to them, what I figured out is don't try to explain all of it. Just pick one part of it, explain that, and then just end by saying, and there's a couple other planks to it, but that's the most important one for this story. So in the morning panel, watching all the panelists try to explain Gamergate to this woman, Sharon Dunton, she's a mom from Atlanta, Georgia. She's a good journalist. She's an SPJ chapter president. Watching them try to explain stuff and her just like asking questions back. So this is about branding? Like she had no idea, because they were trying to explain all of Gamergate at once. I think it's a lot easier when you just talk about the ethics, or just talk about social justice, or just talk about it being online only as opposed to Black Lives Matter, which has some flesh and blood component. But don't try to talk about it all at once, because you'll glaze a lot of corneas.
That beginning part where they attempted to explain that was rough to watch.
That was painful, yeah.
It was painful to watch, and it was clear that there's still, they still have a problem defining what they are in 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just they that have the problem. I mean, journalists have the responsibility also to try to achieve definitions for the rest of the world to understand. So it's, it's journalism failing too, because
sure.
I don't know how. I don't know how to do it too, and I'm still trying to figure out a way to. I got to go to an SPJ board meeting next month in Orlando. The national board's all coming down to Florida, and me and Lynn Walsh are going to have to explain this stuff to some other SPJers, some of them very old, and how successful we are at that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I had someone from a Huffington Post ask me earlier this week, briefly, what is Gamergate?
Are you doing that?
Like,
I got an email from HuffPo too. Huffington Post is doing a year anniversary thing on Gamergate, and they contacted a bunch of people, I guess, and they sent you this little questionnaire ahead of doing this kind of live recording. And one of the questions is, briefly describe Gamergate.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, you guys got. I mean, how much do you know about this? So I want to talk to them separately because I feel like I'm like it's sort of like Lord of the Flies. I feel like I am the smartest dumbass about Gamergate.
Yeah, my best answer to that is Gamergate is a collection of people who are varying levels of displeased with what game journalists and or media critics say and or how they do their jobs.
It's a lot of and/ors.
Well, yeah, it's incredibly vague too, but
Yeah.
Well,
that's the best I could come up with.
I tried to explain Gamergate to my mom, my 78-year-old mom. She looked at me like I'm an alien. Like,
Well,
what the
I'll tell
hell is
you,
wrong with you?
I've told this story before, but last Christmas, I was actually on the Huffington Post last November or something, and someone mentioned Gamergate, and my sister watched the segment. So when I saw her at Christmas, she says, "Andrew, what the hell is Gamergate?" And I said, "Oh boy." And it took me over half an hour to verbally explain the thing to her because it's so vast and complicated and requires like a year-long history lesson to explain how everything rose up, and it is a damn nightmare. So I am really sympathetic to anyone who tries to answer that question briefly or in a tweet. Because it's about impossible without being as ridiculously vague as I just was.
Well, and as we learned from SPJ AirPlay, that even Gamergate can't explain it in under 15 minutes. So, and shoot, I think they tried explaining it over the course of the entire event and couldn't get it down.
Yeah. So, Michael, let me reframe that Reddit question a little bit and ask you, what was your initial impression of Gamergate, and how has that evolved since then?
My initial impression of Gamergate was to listen to everyone else's advice, because I had nothing else to go on, which was that if I was going to follow up on the bombing of the SPJ Ethics Week hashtag, that I would be sucked into a cesspool of online harassing misogynistic white boys living with their parental units. So, like all good journalists, I went into this believing everything I'm told, but not being married to any of it. So that the moment I got any information that didn't jive with what I was told, I just disposed of it. It was never a closely held belief. The way good journalists go quickly into a story is not totally objective, because then I have nothing to start with. You go into a story listening to whatever someone tells you, ask a bunch of questions. The moment that the fact that you get back don't support that thing, you change your opinion, and you gradually, you don't write it that way, but as in the reporting process. Mm-hmm. So it was an easy thing to get into originally, because what I heard sounded suspicious. In that, as a journalist, anytime anybody tells me all of those people are assholes, I don't believe it. All Republicans are assholes, all Democrats are assholes, all gamers are assholes, all Gamergate people are assholes. Whenever I hear the word all, then that's great, because that's easy to disprove. That means I just got to find one person who's not an asshole, and I can start, the reporting, I can start treating it a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah, you never speak in absolutes.
You never speak in absolutes. Good job.
Yeah. So.
Okay, let me ask you another one of these questions. This one's kind of softball, I think. It's right up your alley.
I hate softball questions.
I know, but we'll get it out of the way. Is sloppy journalism worse than unethical journalism?
Well, that's very deep. Because a lot of times,
this is a softball?
Because a lot of times, what unethical journalism is mostly sloppy journalism. Most of the time, in my experience, and there are other people in SPJ who have been dealing with this longer than me, most unethical journalism is not intentional. It's lazy journalism. I mean, they know they could be they know they're being lazy. They don't know they're being unethical. I'm sure in Gamergate, because this thing has gotten so weaponized, there are actually people intentionally doing stupid, evil shit. But most of the time, most unethical journalism is because someone refused to check up on something, refused to, just didn't want to do something, didn't want to admit something, not because they had an agenda, other than they just wanted to go drink more.
Right. Brad?
Okay. This is from Kotaku in Action. Since many agree that the second panel was not going well, besides your criticism regarding the Gamergate panel, what went wrong? Specifically, do you think that you were worse in your role as moderator than at the morning panel? That was from AstroJap.
I think I had to do what I had to do in the panel. I let them talk for 14 minutes straight. I don't know if anyone read the last update I had, but basically what I described is what other people can back up, because it's not just me saying this, but we had a Google Hangout in advance. They knew what the topic was. I understand that Milo especially felt it was important for journalists to get the background of Gamergate, or his version of the background of Gamergate, to know how to report it in the future. But here's the simple fact. Every Gamergater in that audience was pissed off at me for interrupting Milo. And every journalist in the audience and on the stage was confused as hell. So it does not matter what people think about me or Milo. What matters is the audience. And if the purpose of AirPlay was to talk to journalists, I am telling you, I talked to all the journalists that were there, because we had an hour and a half outside during a bomb threat, and none of them knew what the hell was going on. They listened to that 14 minutes. I know Lynn Walsh well enough that I was looking at her as the panelists were talking for 14 minutes straight, and Lynn was just giving me a look like, she kind of looked like she was, I haven't talked to her about this, by the way, I will, but it looked like she was almost scared, like, am I supposed to understand this? Like, was I supposed to read something and I didn't? I don't. And Ren LaForme just had a look on his face like he knew that this was getting in the weeds, and he just kind of like looked at me like, whatever. There's no way to respond to this. So it wasn't personal. It was that my job was to talk to the journalists and to their readers. And if they don't understand what's going on, that's the only metric I need.
Well, do you think, because it seems like there was a miscommunication about what that second panel was going to be about. Like, it seemed like they thought that they were going to be talking about Gamergate and, culture war stuff, and it ended up that you were not interested in talking about that. Obviously, you had a discussion beforehand, so there seems like there was some confusion. Or it was...
I don't know where that came from. I mean, Milo emailed me afterwards, and it was a fun email exchange, but I basically said, you know what, okay, I'm sorry, because as a journalist, if all three of you thought something wrong, I guess I must have done something wrong. But we had a Google Hangout weeks in advance where I said, this is exactly what we're going to do. I emailed them several times leading up to the event saying, here's what's going to happen. On the website itself, ever since it was announced that Anti-Gamergate wasn't coming, which is for about almost a month, there was the exact question for that debate listed on the website. During lunchtime at AirPlay, we all got back on stage to do a mic check, and I said exactly what we're going to do. And that's where, in my update, I recounted the fact that they wanted 6 minutes. Lynn was like, well, maybe that's a little long. I told them exactly what we were going to talk about. So, I'm new at communicating with this group of people. Maybe that wasn't enough, wasn't effective enough. I don't know. But I still think it was instructive that that's how it went down, because that is sort of reflective of the whole Gamergate thing. So I'm not upset about it myself, because I still think it's an accurate reflection of real shit. So I just know this. I wasn't going to let anyone bully me into silence. So when Milo kept talking and I kept interrupting, a lot of times what happens in situations like that is, and Milo's pretty smart. He's done some journalism before. He knows if you're in an interview with somebody and you keep interrupting them, they're probably going to back down, because as the interviewer, you don't want to step on your source. So you kind of will let them take over an interview if push comes to shove. The difference is this wasn't an interview. This was a panel discussion set up by SPJ, for SPJ, and other journalists. And I have absolutely no self-respect, so it didn't really matter that I was going to damage my reputation or anything like that.
Okay.
What I'm hearing from Gamergate is they're explaining it like they need to go into this whole SJW feminism background in order to explain what the problem was that Gamergate was having, and they don't believe that you let them do that.
They're right.
Okay.
The reason is that if they want to talk to mainstream journalists, you don't dump the entire story on them all at once. You get them interested in the story, in the now, the news. Then you tell them all the background. I thought it was very instructive because it gets to the core of the problem in talking to mainstream journalists, in that you can't talk to them for 14 minutes at a time. First, get them interested in the story, then tell them the history. The problem is, it's not even a matter of laziness. I had a bunch of people email me, Koretzky, you needed to back off to let us explain social justice warriors to the journalists. And if they don't want to hear that, they're lazy and they're stupid, because there's a guy named Bradley Glasgow who he did a really easy story in...
Brad, by the way, just Brad.
Sorry, dude. So, he did this story, and it was totally easy to do, which, of course, you guys talked about last week, that it wasn't that easy. I try to counter with this. It does. Even the journalists that were there that would have loved to write about you that very moment, that were dedicated and were willing to put in months of work, they understood none of that conversation. And I talked to them. They understood none of that conversation. Your desire to explain the history is fine. I'm telling you, your tactics, your strategy might be fine, but your tactics weren't working. What Milo, Kathy, and Christina were talking about for 14 minutes, none of the journalists, I'm talking zero. If I can ever use the word all, this is the time I can use it. None of them understood what the hell was going on. Therefore, it wasn't effective.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually, well, let's get these questions out of the way, and then I'll ask you some questions of my own. Okay. They wonder why you were not critical of Gamergate for. One of their things is that they want websites to adopt an ethics policy, right? So they were boycotting certain sites. And they want to know why you weren't critical of Gamergate for boycotting Polygon when clearly they put up an ethics policy. It's a loaded question.
No, it's not. I mean, it's okay question. It's the same reason I wasn't going to let Milo talk for another 14 minutes about startups in San Francisco and social justice. It's not really what the event was about. There's so much that can be. I'm not belittling either of these issues. There are a lot of great things to talk about. You can't talk about them all at once. I'd much rather drill down on a few topics, and even then we didn't get to everything, than try to tackle everything. And frankly, as a journalist, if a reader wants to boycott a site, more power to them. I don't care. I mean, you're a reader. Your eyeballs are yours. Take them wherever you want to go.
Sure, but I kind of get what they're saying. They're saying this is they're boycotting a site because it doesn't have an ethics policy, and they're still boycotting a site even though it has an ethics policy.
Well, having an ethics policy doesn't mean shit. I mean, having one is great, but not using it, I mean, it's not... The reason SPJ has an ethics policy, if you think about it, why would SPJ need an ethics policy if just everyone has their own? The reason is, if SPJ has one, they've had it for 100 years, and it's at least known around, among journalists. I know that most people outside of journalism don't know SPJ, but journalists do, is that if you don't follow that and you get called on it, like we said at AirPlay, we can't suspend your journalism license, and such a thing doesn't exist, nor do we want it to.
Sure.
But we can, you'll look like a jerk. You'll look like an idiot. So, Polygon having an ethics policy doesn't mean much to me, since I don't think they covered this very ethically. So,
right. Okay, that's fair. That brings up an interesting thing that I had said back in October when this thing was like at full bore, and that is that different websites obviously have different ethics policies. A lot of people disagree with that they shouldn't, but they do. It's a fact.
ethics policies can vary, especially when they're more detailed. So, for instance, you could follow or copy parts of the SPJ Code of Ethics, and you could add a bunch of stuff that's very particular, say, to gaming, that isn't covered by that specifically. That's fine. We love it when people take the Code of Ethics and add to it.
Sure.
We're not really encouraged by people that take the Code of Ethics and say, like, yeah, we're not going to do those. We'll just get rid of those.
Right. Brad?
Okay, this one's from Anti-Gamergate. From Nate Summers. Should a movement for ethics in journalism be engaged in an email campaign targeting the advertisers of sites they disagree with? Doesn't that only erode the firewall between advertising and editorial?
Well, I don't know how it works in gaming, but when I was a reporter, the advertising department was on a separate floor. We didn't really know who they are. We didn't date them, although we would have. They're better looking than us, and they got paid more. They didn't want to date us, let's put it that way. But I got no problem with someone doing that. If then it's up to the advertisers and the publisher. Usually when you see on websites or print publications where it says publisher and then it says editor, you're thinking, what's the difference between those two? The publisher runs the business side, and the editor runs the writing side. And the publisher will give the editor some shit every so often for stuff they got published, but the editor protects the staff. Like, the staff doesn't often hear about it. I've been an editor before, and I would get some shit. I wrote some stuff down here. I'm in Miami. I wrote some stuff about cruise lines. Those are not the people you really want to go insulting because they have a tendency to, pull their advertising. But they always come back. So the publisher will make great pains to say, I chewed that guy a new asshole, and whatever. But if the journalism is good, the publisher is going to lose more by trying to interfere with the coverage than they're going to gain. Because the moment, this is what's so funny about that question, I've heard questions like this. If a publisher, the business side of a website, a gaming website or a media outlet, caves to an advertiser just once, what do you think is going to happen? That advertiser now knows you're his bitch. And advertisers talk to other advertisers. They're all rich people. And they'll say, oh, yeah, you can totally roll that dude. Just go there and complain that you don't like the story and then say you want half off an ad. So you just deal with it. It's part of life. And if Gamergate or anti-Gamergate want to do that, I have no problem. What I find really interesting is that's just a tactic, and I've had both sides give me examples of the other side doing that and asking me to declare it unethical. That's a pretty standard tool in both camps' quivers.
Yeah, that's fair. Let me ask you a question that I have. It seemed like Lynn and Ren were not prepared for those 5 questions. Did they only take a brief look at these things, or did they study them in depth? And do you think it would have been better if they had studied them in depth?
I purposely told them to not dive deep. And when I got them from Gamergate, I had asked Gamergate to give me 1 paragraph of explanation on each, and then as many links as they want. But the links got to be in order of importance, because I wanted the Gamergate warning panelists to have to start thinking in terms of, how am I going to tell not just journalists, but anybody who doesn't know about Gamergate, how would I start explaining this? So I wanted them to actually have to start kind of summing up their own material for someone who's not them. Then I told Ren and Lynn, familiarize yourself with these 5, and I even told them, look, if we get to 3, that'll be a victory, because I know how these things go. But I said, familiarize yourself with them, but don't dive deep into them, because I don't want you to be so knowledgeable about it that you're just like the mirror image of the other panel. You are standing in, like all journalists, you are standing in for an interested, intelligent audience who has no background. So I wanted them to know the topics, but be dumb enough to be able to say, I'm confused, what does that mean? That question, which will help the rest of the audience.
Just a quick follow-up there. the first panel only got through 3 of the ethics issues that Gamergate raised. Would you have preferred to have seen the 1 or 2 of the other 2 that didn't get seen discussed over the 3 that did get discussed?
I don't know if you I mean, I think some of it was being aired, but I think I actually was on recording saying, let's start with this one, and Gamergate said, no, we want to do it in this order. I thought that one of them was undebatable because one of them was literally how media's covered Gamergate, and it's like that's too broad. You're not going to learn anything. You can learn something from a very specific example because the lessons might ripple outwards into bigger things. But that one, I would have loved to talk about the Game Journal Pros thing because that's just interesting, and something similar has been done other places and done better. So
yeah, that's the one I most wanted to hear about. I was really looking forward to hearing Ren and Lynn's thoughts on that subject, and I was super bummed that AirPlay didn't have the time to get to that one.
Again, I wanted Gamergate to choose the order by which they would approach their own stuff, because even that's telling to me. Like, everyone it was really funny. People were commenting to me or emailing me saying, this was good, this was a disaster, didn't you think this was a disaster, did you like that part? And to me, all of it was revealing. Like one of your readers said, an illuminating failure. It doesn't. Everything that happened said something about this whole past year, and that to me was the most important thing.
Okay.
Okay, should I go into another question here?
Go for it.
All right, KIA Undelete, Pro Gamergate. Shouldn't reporters who don't have sufficient time to research a complicated issue, such as Gamergate, just not report on it rather than do a hack job in a couple of hours?
Yes, that's part of the problem is that, one, that's why a lot of mainstream media don't do stories on Gamergate, but two, when they have to, they're doing the best they can. There was someone wrote about this, but I actually was in the middle of this. So there's this guy, Michael Van Sickler, he used to be a reporter at the Palm Beach Post, and I knew him when he was there. And he's now an editor, like a line editor at the Tampa Bay paper. And he was there. And we get evacuated, and he knows nothing about Gamergate, right? He's a little older than me. He's a really good journalist. I mean, he's a good journalist. So he tweets out that, hey, bomb threat, because he was actually there mostly for the other journalism conference that was going on at the same time. So he was bopping in and out. He didn't really know everything that's going on. He tweets out that Gamergate calls it a bomb threat, And so we're waiting outside. I'm handing out bottled water, and he's like, dude, Koretzky, like, look at my phone, man. And he's got, 128 Twitter followers, and suddenly 10,000 tweets. He's like, what did I do? And I'm like,
I saw that.
I'm passing out the bottle of water. I said, tell you what, let me pass this out and come back to you, because I can't explain this to you in a few minutes. It'll take a minute. He's like, what did I do? So as I'm passing out bottled water, I run across this other guy. I forget his name. And he's Gamergate and very upset. Who is this Michael Van Sickler? I'm like, well, that dude right over there. You want to go talk to him? Because I have this theory, right? The whole reason that we did AirPlay in person was, you can't shitpost someone, 2 feet away from them. So he's like, yes, I want to go talk to him. And he starts marching over there, and he's really mad. And I get them face to face, and before he starts launching into his thing, I say, listen, I know this guy. He's a really good journalist. He's clueless about all this shit. Now, you can yell at him, which he's not going to be upset with you because he's been a journalist a long time. He's been yelled at before. But he certainly isn't going to really want to invest any time in this. Or you could have a conversation with the man and try to explain this like we couldn't inside this morning. And I went back and passed out more water. When I came back, they were deep into conversation. Michael sent out another tweet saying I was wrong. So, and he's not agreeing with everything that this dude agrees with. He's just saying he was wrong about one part of it. So I'm not, for any anti-Gamergaters out there, it's like, Koretzky, you drank the Kool-Aid. Like, okay. But Michael Van Sickler was not saying that he agreed with everything this dude said. He was admitting that he misunderstood something. And now he's a little more curious about this, right? Because it was a face-to-face conversation in, under a blistering sun and 90-degree heat, 100% humidity, talking to this other sweaty dude. And to me, that was perfect.
Let me ask you a question about disclosures. I emailed Lynn Walsh, but she didn't get back to me because obviously she's got a life and a job. But but no, I'm not saying you don't. I'm sure you have a full life and all that stuff. Okay.
With only 2 games that he plays.
Yeah.
I'm really good at them.
I would hope so.
But my question is, do you think that there's a statute of limitations on disclosures? I mean, how long before you don't have to disclose something? Like, if something happened 5 years ago, and it's relevant to what you're writing about, even as a journalist or as an opinion editor, how long before you can stop disclosing something that's writing?
There is no statute of limitations. There's a statute of relevancy. So if an old story comes up because it affects a new story and people are talking about it, your readers are discussing it, then you have to talk about it. So are we talking about the Patricia Hernandez thing that came up at AirPlay?
No, we're not. I'm not going to say at this moment in time.
Now I'm intrigued. To me, if it comes up because it's related to a new story is related to this past story, or even if just a bunch of readers start getting agitated about it, and there's enough of them that it's a critical mass, your obligation is to deal with it. This is not the law. There's no statute of limitations on being ethical.
Sure, but it was for lack of a better term.
It was what?
I used it for lack of a better term.
Okay. I'm confused.
I'm sorry that you're confused.
I think he's just saying he used the term statute of limitations because he couldn't think of a better way to describe it. Describe the disclosure rule for how long ago it remains relevant.
It's not about time. It's about relevancy. If a media outlet committed an ethical sin 10 years ago and that story's dead and no one gives a shit, then it stays buried. If a story reappears with that same person and it dredges up a bunch of stuff that happened before and it might impugn that media outlet's integrity, you address it and you get it out of the way. When that does happen, a lot of times is sometimes publications change editorship. So when I was editor of a jazz magazine, one of my predecessors did something really stupid. And it didn't come up again until that artist, who was an older artist, hadn't put out an album in a long, long time, put out a new album. And therefore his fans were suddenly looking at the coverage of all the publications covering this guy coming back after a decade and putting out this album. Our publication had done something bad years before. Again, not out of maliciousness, out of laziness. And so it was worth addressing, and not like, gnashing of teeth and rending of garments. Hey, 10 years ago we had said this. It turned out not to be the case. We apologized then. We apologize now. Let's get on with our lives.
So do you think that people that are either opinion editors or political, for lack of a better term, political pundits that write, what should they disclose? And how far do you go?
They, more than anybody, have to be more self-critical because.
But they don't. They don't disclose. I mean, if you read pretty popular political writers, they don't disclose anything.
The best ones do, and they're the ones with the most credibility. I mean, there are. Look, if you're a very partisan person, whether it's gaming or politics, you're always going to have your fans because you're saying things that people want to hear. But if you want credibility amongst the people that are not you, that are not like in that one camp, then you disclose. So you can have a full career and just like throw red meat to one side and make a living, if not a killing, and go on with your life. But if you want credibility outside of that group, you will do these things. If you don't, you won't.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a hypothetical, okay?
Please do.
All right, so I work for an Apple company. I work for Dole. Okay, let's say I work for Dole a couple of times to do something. And then I'm suddenly, a few years later, I'm writing about regulations on importing fruit. Is that a conflict of interest?
You used to work there and now you don't.
Right.
Look, man. I would love to talk about apples as absolutes, but it's a case by case basis. It depends what you write. I mean, it depends what you're saying. I mean, that's the thing that's what I actually like about journalism. And I think what's interesting about, especially talking to game developers, is that, and my brother's he writes software. So
right.
The difference in this conversation is that my brother and game developers that I've talked to in the past few months, their jobs are very crystal clear. The game works or it doesn't. My brother writes some code and it doesn't work, the screen goes blank. I have other relations that are accountants. If they don't add things right, they go to jail. Journalism can be done a myriad of different ways, right? I can write the same story 100 different ways and it will still work. And if you don't think it works, we have a wonderful argument about it. So the thing about this whole Gamergate thing is that everyone, I think Brad said it last week in your podcast, where when he was talking to Gamergaters and anti-Gamergate people, a lot of them are what he called point counters. Like, that's 1 point for our side, and this is another point for our side. And that they want every example to have this, okay, was that a point for their side or our side? And a lot of times I got to tell them, one, I don't know enough about this particular example, but two, you're throwing a hypothetical at me, and I can't tell you that because it doesn't work that way. And if it did work that way, journalism would be very boring, and you could just have you could program a computer to do it.
Which would be nice.
Not for me.
Mr. Ethics, you just type in your question and it spits out the answer for you.
I just like robots doing things.
Right, and then I go and become assistant manager at P.F. Chang's.
Well, I will eat there every Friday with my family and give you a good tip.
You better all spit your food.
Well, then he might give you a bad Yelp review.
Oh.
Yeah.
Heavens.
Brad.
Let's see.
Brad, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, one last question from an Against Gamergator. Text Time 2015. If Gamergate started out as a hate movement but morphed into an ethics/anti-SJW movement, does that excuse the people who joined for ethics only from responsibility from how the movement started?
Yeah, the ethics discussion is totally independent of anything else. If you are a terrorist pedophile and you want to talk to me about journalism ethics, I will talk to you about journalism ethics, and I will hope you'll get arrested for the terrorism and the pedophilia. But I'm not going to stop anyone from having a conversation about the ethics of journalism because they might have done some other stupid shit.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question from Twitter. Cho Ryujin asks, how can the audience, the reading audience, punish journalists for doing a bad job? How do we hold them accountable?
Yeah, you guys talked a little bit about this last week, and I didn't like your answer. Your answer was, don't read that journalist.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine as far as it goes, but I understand why Gamergate, anti-Gamergate, or any group of readers hate certain journalists and get so agitated. It's because they don't have, even with the internet, don't have as much access to the media. So if you don't like something in the New York Times, if you're conservative, if you don't like something in the Wall Street Journal and you're a liberal, you're upset so much because you realize that they have really big megaphones and they can talk to a lot of people. So you know that if you tune out, that message is still getting to a lot of other people. The best way to counter that, I mean, you can do all the things we talked about earlier. You can not read them. You can try to boycott the advertisers. You can, bomb their hashtags or their comment section. But I really think the best way to get a journalist and their editor to take notice is to have a reasonable conversation in the comment section. It's a slower process. You don't get the results as fast. But here's a tip. Journalists, this is what will freak out a journalist. If you write a comment that says, I liked something in your post, and then I hated the following things in your post, that always fucks us up. Because we can't go back to our editor and say, this guy's crazy, man. Look at this guy. He was just like, he hated everything I wrote. No, find something in the article there's got to be something. You read it. There's got to be something in it that did not completely suck. And really, seriously, if you read a lot of articles and everything in them is wrong, then you're back to the thing I said at the beginning, which is everything, all of it. 100%, you really believe that 100% of that is all wrong? If you find one thing in there that you can say is good, you have totally messed up that journalist. Because
so, I like the way he uses his Oxford comma, but everything else sucked.
That would be interesting. But you understand where I'm coming from, right? I mean, having a rational conversation where you actually like some things and dislike others also compels the writer to respond in comments. A lot of times people ask me, well, is there an ethical requirement for journalists to respond to comments? No. And I have trouble doing with SPJ AirPlay website, although I read all of them. But the ones I'm most likely to engage with aren't the ones that just say you're a douchebag, because the only thing I can say is you're right. It's the ones that are going to say, like, here are some points, and not like 9 paragraphs of points. Just like, here are some succinct observations. I like what you wrote. I didn't like this. I'm going to feel compelled as just a human being to engage with you because you sound reasonable, and reasonable people will be heard by other reasonable people.
Yeah, I make silly YouTube videos, and I can be opinionated in them. And there are people who disagree with some of the things I say, but I love it when some of my viewers will post things that make me reconsider my position or think about things in a way I had not considered before. I mean, sometimes it's human nature to get defensive, especially with the way some YouTube commenters can phrase things. But yeah, I agree. I think comment section is maybe not underused, but a lot of times misused. Because one of the things you hear a lot is don't read the comments, especially on Yahoo articles. Just don't do it. Save your sanity. And yeah, and I can see where they're saying, but you end up, although it can be hard to find sometimes, you end up missing some really interesting conversation and points of view that you would otherwise probably never hear.
If I would have done that in the beginning, I would have just seen on the SPJ Ethics Week hashtag all those images of those cartoon images of men pissing on young boys, and I would have stopped. So there was some good stuff, good comments underneath all of that weird stuff, and that's why I try to read, even if I can't respond to all of them, I try to read all the tweets and all the comments to anything that I write, because somewhere in there are some really reasonable people, and to me that is the essence of what Gamergate and anti-Gamergate is. I wrote this, and I really do believe it, is that the most reasonable people in Gamergate and the most reasonable people in anti-Gamergate have more in common with each other than they do the assholes in their own movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I think the assholes on both sides have a lot of commonalities between them too.
Very true. Yeah. They're just too dogmatic to know it.
Yeah.
So we should all get together and go bowling, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted.
That would be a fun bowling night.
But no, I agree with you. I mean, if people would approach things, with more reasonable comments and writers reply, like I'll reply to somebody that's reasonable, even if they disagree with what I've written. But if you're going to call me an asshole, then I probably don't want to have a conversation with you, because there's no point, because you already think I'm an asshole.
I always thought it'd be cool if somebody, you guys are all smart dudes, someone wrote a script that would push to the top of the comment section the shortest relevant comment. Like, I don't know how you do, like, if it's 9 paragraphs long, it goes further down, and if it's 1 paragraph long, it goes further up. And that would teach people to have to be succinct, because there's a saying in journalism, which is, I didn't have time, boss, to write that short. That it's actually easy to write 9 paragraphs. It's hard to write 1 paragraph.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We should be encouraging everyone to write tighter, not just journalists.
I've been working on that.
That's the fun thing about Twitter, is you've got 140 characters. Get your point in there.
No, because people tweet at you 25 times.
That's cheating.
You write a 75 letter Twitter or a tweet, and then you get 50 responses back from a single person. But going back to the comments and having a discussion in the comments and stuff. This is actually something Green and Purple brought up on the YouTube comments of this very podcast. What do you think of when somebody closes the comment section, like they have a blog or they have YouTube videos and they close the comment section? Do you think that is, it's well within their rights, but do you think that is conducive to what they're trying to say? Do you think it harms them or helps them? I guess.
I never understood that, because journalists write stuff for it to be read, and why close? I don't understand closing off the comment section. I mean, if someone's going to be offended reading the comments, then that's their problem. If you're offended by the comments, that is also your problem. You're a pretty thin-skinned journalist. And I don't see any reason to ever do that. I've never closed off the comment section to any post, other than the ones that were part of a contest sort of thing, like where you posted something and then you got something for doing that because you have to. But I want to see every comment. I mean, I may not read all of them carefully. If you write 9 paragraphs, my favorite comments and my favorite emails are the ones that start off like this, and I get a lot of them that start off like this. Koretzky, you're a fucking douchebag. I don't even trust you. Let me explain a whole bunch of stuff to you in the next 1,500 words. It's like, well, you know what? I probably don't really want to read that. Or the other version of this is, I think you're a liar. What do you think about this? It's like, well,
what do you care if you think I'm a liar?
You're a liar. Tell me more lies.
Right. So I may not read those very carefully, but I will skim them. And especially the one good thing about getting into a topic like Gamergate is I don't have to read every comment all the time, because sometimes they're giving me background that I already know now, which is nice. Mm-hmm. And other times I can tell that they have a viewpoint, and I don't need to read all of it to get that viewpoint. So at a certain point, and I'm not even a games journalist, if I'm a games journalist and I get bombed with 200 comments to something, I should be able to scroll through that and pick out the good stuff and ignore the bad stuff even quicker than I can now do it. So, and it's not like, even the stuff that I don't really read, I understand, because I'm scrolling through. I'm like, I see what he's doing. He's one of those guys. He's saying this sort of thing. I get it, and I keep reading. And then someone has a new take on something. Oh wow, that's cool. I never thought about that. So I think that a lot of the people that ask these sort of questions believe that journalists are either weeping when they read the comments because their feelings are hurt, or they're taking notes on them. Mostly, they're just scrolling through them until they find something that interests them. So if you're writing the comments to speak to the writer, be interesting. If you're writing it to have an argument within the comments with someone else, which I think is fascinating too, great. But I've never seen that work. I mean, I've never seen two people in the comments section of any article go back and forth, and the last one says, "Holy shit, my worldview was wrong. I want to subscribe to your newsletter."
Yeah, that's our comments section in a nutshell.
I will not stop until I have corrected every person on the internet who is wrong.
But which is fine. I mean, but we give everybody an opportunity to talk too. So.
Yeah. Right. I don't think most people on the comments section realize that their best, most effective tool is not talking to each other or the journalists. It's talking to other readers who come to this and may not know. That's why if you leave a comment that says, I agree with you on some stuff and I disagree with you on other stuff, the other readers are going to take your comment that much more seriously, because obviously it doesn't look like you have an agenda, and you obviously are a reasonable human being, and you're taking issue with this guy. I'm going to maybe read that. So that's the best thing you can do in a comment section, and therefore I'm never going to close the comments because I'm always craving that one last reasonable person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should I ask the Mr. James Fudge question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, this came from Kotaku in Action, username Siri. On the last Super Podcast Action Committee, James Fudge said that he wouldn't release the Code of Ethics for Game Politics ever because he has a lot of experience and he knows what to do and what not to do. Is this a reasonable standpoint in regards to a news outlet?
You can do whatever the hell you want to do. I don't think it helps you. I mean, I heard you say that last week, too. I mean, I was listening to the podcast when I was driving, so I didn't, maybe there was some context I wasn't getting, but I remember thinking to myself, wow, if I was him, I would have either not said anything or I would have said a lot more. Because you're just opening yourselves up for abuse. The reason there's an ethics policy, one of the things that Lynn and Ren were talking about at AirPlay is not even a conflict of interest, the appearance of a conflict of interest. Journalism is so soft of a science, right? It's like you have to trust the journalist, and if you don't, then, you know, what do you got? That an ethics policy is also not just to be ethical, to be so clean that there's not even an appearance of a conflict of interest. Sometimes you don't do stuff that's the right thing to do just because it might look wrong. You said you had an ethics policy that you're not going to release. I got to imagine that is just like an open flame for a moth, man. That's just, I don't know why you would say that. Why would you say that? Now that we're here, tell me your logic.
My logic is that I'm just not going to be forced to put up an ethics policy because a bunch of people think I'm unethical.
But you have one.
Sure, I have one. I've been doing this for 18 years. I know the difference between right and wrong. Also, back in October of last year, I wrote an editorial when all of this Game Journal Pro stuff happened. So there is kind of an ethics policy there, if you go and read it. But the point is, I'm not going to be bullied into doing something because a mob of people say that I should.
Even if they're your readers?
They're not our readers.
Fair enough.
They're not. They're not our readers.
All right. I mean, there's
if our reader said, James, you have to have an ethics policy, it's so important to us, I'd put one up. Just like that.
Interesting. I wonder if they'll do that now.
I hope they do.
I mean, there's nothing unethical about not having an ethics policy.
Next week.
Should Gamergate what's the name of our site? Game Politics have a published ethics policy.
The point is, the ethics is in the work. I mean, we're covering them, are we not? Are we covering them fairly? Would you say?
Well, I mean, an ethics policy is like a fire extinguisher, really. I mean, you don't need it very often, and when you do, it can really help put out a fire. So you don't have a problem now, but if anything ever came up, it would help you put out the fire before it did more damage.
Well, you should read the editorial that's been pinned to my Twitter account.
I will. All right, I'll do that.
And it lists all of the things I've never done. Ever. So it is sort of an ethics policy. Andrew, would you say that's an ethics policy?
I think it makes clear what your stance on a lot of the issues that Gamergate frequently brings up is. Reading the editorial, I find it clear that where you stand on these issues. Sure.
Right. So, but my point was that I'm not going to be like some of these other sites that only put one up to appease a bunch of angry people. That's not the right reason to put it up.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the motivation. I just care about the results. But it's also true that if you put up an ethics policy and don't follow it, you haven't done anything anyway.
Right. So, but I let that question get through.
Fair enough.
There's as Zeta says in our comment section here, ethics policy does not equal sufficient and enforced ethics policy.
Exactly. He just said that. Obviously, if you have one and you don't enforce it, what's the friggin' point?
Yeah.
And someone on Twitter, Societal Justice W says, "Lol, nice temper tantrum."
What?
Whose? Mine or his?
James, I think. So,
Okay.
as temper tantrums go, James, that nice.
Yeah, you'll probably get your own thread again on KIA.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Michael, how would you rate game journalism today on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being absolutely perfect in every conceivable way, and 1 being, oh, good God, burn it to the ground and start over.
I can't rate it because I don't know. I'm not the audience, so it's not a cop out. I can. There are things I don't like about games journalism that I can talk to you about, but if it's doing a good job for its audience, that's like asking me, do I think the Sheboygan Times is covering the city of Sheboygan, Wisconsin very well? I'm not there. I'm not in your niche. I don't know if these sites are doing 3 things very well. 1, if they are reviewing games, if they're doing a consistent job. You don't have to like the reviews, but they have to be consistent and ethical. 2, if they're giving you gaming news, new developments, of course they're doing that ethically. And 3, if they're providing a community for their readers to have conversations both with the staff and each other, so that they can talk about the news of the day or the week. So I don't know. I can tell you, I'll volunteer this then. What I don't like about the gaming press, I mentioned some of it at AirPlay, in looking at it, what I can tell, is I don't always think that they mark opinion and news accurately as separate entities, so that I know when I'm reading something, before I start reading it, I know what the hell it is. Is this news or opinion? Sometimes that stuff is blended too much, and it's not. I mean, that's fine. Truth in advertising, truth in labeling. So I don't think they do that very well. I don't think they're very consistent. So, for instance, Polygon covering a bomb threat, but not the event that it was at. I know that there were some comments from anti-Gamergate people saying, Koretzky, you arrogant prick, they don't have to cover your event. But then they covered other things about Gamergate. That why wouldn't they cover this big event about it? And again, they don't have to say they like it, but to ignore it is the biggest sin in journalism. I got no problem with someone saying, even if they said, happened on the weekend, we're busy, we're a small media outlet, we're going to get to this later, but this shit happened and we didn't like it. That'd be fine. But ignoring news is bad. So what this leads me to believe, just like in anything else, this is how ethics work in journalism. If I have a question because I caught them doing something I don't think is right, how much other stuff am I now going to doubt about somewhere like Polygon or Kotaku? Kotaku, everyone loves to hate on Kotaku. I think they've done some excellent journalism. I've read some excellent journalism, read some crappy journalism, but, again, you can't say the word all. To ignore AirPlay in its entirety after writing the stuff it's written about Gamergate, it's covered Gamergate, is really weird to me, especially since the editor and I had very long conversations. They were substantial conversations. I mean, they were meaty. There was stuff to dig into and talk about. This wasn't like an event that was like a clown show that was over in 15 minutes and is only worth 1 paragraph. There was a lot of stuff said there. There was a lot of tension there. There was a bomb threat. Kotaku didn't even mention that, but they mentioned the bomb threat for a Gamergate meetup in Washington, D.C. So why would you mention a bomb threat for an event that was just Gamergate and not mention something at an event that was bigger than that? And to this day, not mention it even a week later. Those raise questions for me, not just about Gamergate. They make me wonder, what else are those sites also doing inconsistently? Now, there might be a good reason for it. I'm open-minded enough. But I emailed the editors, and I never heard back. I never got an even... Usually the professional courtesy is, especially if a journalist emails another journalist, is to pretty quickly reply with, even this, dude, I really can't even talk about that. I'm sure you understand. Like, maybe the bosses, maybe a thing. And I'd be, I'd be cool with that. Or even off the record, Koretzky, this response, me telling you I can't talk about it, would be one thing. I heard nothing from 3 editors that I emailed. And I just think that's weird, because if they're not emailing me, they're definitely not emailing their readers.
So again, this circles back to what you were saying about it. It's not even necessarily impropriety, but the appearance of it.
Yeah, I mean, people, look, you can see from work you guys already do that sometimes you get slammed for something that you didn't intend and really don't even think reads that way, but someone took it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you have to,
I've had that.
right? And you have to address it just because there's no other. It's not like this is a computer program where you can look at the code and say, no, I did it right. It's all about appearance. It's all about if the audience didn't understand it, then it's your fault. That's why if the afternoon panel really didn't get what I was saying, even though I did all of this other stuff that I thought everyone else understood, because the journalists all understood it because they were part of that same hangout with the afternoon panel. But if Milo, Christina, and Kathy really didn't get it, that's on me. I'm a journalist. I must have fucked something up.
Well, here's the thing, though. Isn't it hard to cover yourself when you are so central to the story? I mean, they're so central to that first panel. So how do they properly cover that? It's kind of like Breitbart not covering the fact that people are saying that the Trump campaign's, paying them money for better coverage. How do you cover yourself?
Oh, it's really hard to do, but you just write it the way you just said it. I mean, we were accused of this by this other media outlet. Our own editor denies it. I've had to write stories before where I've had to quote my own newspaper because they got involved in a story. Because especially when you're a newspaper and you cover a community,
Right.
you're in the community. Shit's going to happen. That's what I was talking about at AirPlay. That's what Lynn was talking about. You guys bring up these scenarios like they're novel. Shit like this has happened in journalism for hundreds of years. But no one in the gaming press ever reached out to an organization like SPJ and said, hey, what's the template for doing this? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Give us the pros and cons and the different menu options for dealing with this particular crisis, real or imagined. And someone like Stephen Totillo knows that shit because he's a graduate from Columbia Journalism School. He's a smart dude. One of the things I always thought about doing was looking at who runs these gaming websites because, maybe a lot of them aren't journalists and they don't know what SPJ is, but I know some of them do. And if they're not going to reach out to SPJ, some of them might know Pointer Institute. They might know a J School. But what's occurred to me looking into this is that the larger gaming websites are pretty much really isolated. They don't talk to other journalists. There are music magazines. You can go to journalism conventions, and there'll be music magazines, and you're at the bar drinking with a financial reporter, and we're still talking about journalism because money and music, different topics, but the same way of covering it. I've never seen a gaming journalist at any conference. I've never talked to one before I got involved in this. And one of the solutions, I hope, is just to bring them into a larger journalism community so that they can vent to us and then we can sort of educate them back.
Yeah. By the way, the examples I'm using, I'm not saying they're novel. I'm trying to put it out there so that people understand why somebody might not cover something, like why Kotaku would go and cover themselves.
It's hard to do, but I think it's really important. And if you become the story, I don't know that that's a bad thing anyway.
Well,
No.
I disagree with that.
It depends. If you become the story, okay. For instance, say Brad's story that he did trying to quantify Gamergate. If that story went viral and got picked up by mainstream media, and then people hated on that story and liked that story, you guys writing a story about how that story happened, basically last week's podcast where Brad explained some of that stuff, you are essentially covering yourself. It doesn't have to be for bad stuff. It doesn't have to be for, hey, I'm a roommate. My roommate is, involved in this gaming industry. It doesn't always have to be bad.
I think when it's bad is when it's a real it's a struggle.
Yeah, tough.
Well, yeah.
That's our job. We dish it out all the time. We got to be able to make it.
Sure.
I wanted to talk to you about the. You're talking about news and opinion should be separated, and that was actually one of the themes I thought of the second panel. I'm actually doing an article on that kind of stuff. I've talked to a few reporters who their argument is that that's a bit of an antiquated notion, that's an old newspaper conceit, and 2015 journalism no longer expects reporters to only report straight news. You can editorialize in your article. What do you think about that?
Doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the readers think. I mean, journalists can sit around at conventions and talk about what should be done, but if the readers don't like it, we have to go where the readers go. So it's not our decision. I know this. Well, I guess I would put this in the form of a question. If games journalism was done a little more traditionally, would Gamergate have happened or been as loud as it is? I don't know, but I know that journalists spend a lot of time talking about what journalism should be, and then they get pissed off when the public doesn't come along. It's up to the public. So if they decide that journalism can be more blended, I'll do that stuff. But right now, that's not what I hear from the members of the public I talk to in any particular audience. I have yet to see an audience, whether it's games, whether it's politics, whether it's jazz music, which I've covered. I've yet to see an audience that says, you know what, don't give me the news, just kind of mix it with your opinion really subtly, and I'll just really eat that shit up.
Yeah, I don't care what other sites do, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that you should blend the two. It should be one or the other, and they should be marked.
Now, some papers, like, if they'll mark things analysis, they'll post a short news item and then they'll analyze it. That's fine as long as it's clearly labeled. So, and it doesn't have to be clearly labeled like the New York Times does it. Within the gaming culture, it can be labeled any way that the audience understands it. I'm not advocating any particular course of action. What I am hearing, though, if I hear this from both Gamergate and anti-Gamergate, then I take it to be true. There's a trope in journalism that if both sides say something, it's probably true, because they hate each other's fucking guts. So if they agree on something, right, I mean, even if I don't investigate it right away, I can probably at least in the beginning assume that it's true. I've had both Gamergate and anti-Gamergate people tell me that when they read some of the bigger gaming websites, they're confused. So if Gamergate and anti-Gamergate can agree on that, then the gaming press probably needs to take a look at itself. That's actually where Gamergate and anti-Gamergate, if they both say they agree on good ethics, they could actually work together, because together they could definitely affect change. It would freak out a bunch of gaming editors if known people on both sides of the issue came to them in agreement. Their heads would explode.
Yeah, well, I think anti-Gamergate would actually say that they agree with the whole ethics thing. They want disclosure, but they just think that Gamergate is a hate group and a harassment campaign. So they don't think you can ask for ethics under the guise of starting off as a harassment campaign.
So you know what? Work together on one issue and agree to disagree on the other issues. I mean, to me, that's what politics is, right? I mean, it's I hate your guts. We both have a shared interest. Let's go knock that thing down, and then we'll continue our fight over here. I would love to see that happen within the gaming world. I would love to see the larger gaming websites get pressure from all sides to do better. And if it's from all sides, then the agendas don't matter. It's just about doing a better job. I can't imagine that all these gaming websites are financially thriving. So most niche websites, like if you come, for instance, like this is maybe a dumb example, but when I worked at this jazz magazine, right, the world's largest jazz magazine, we were always trying to cover more than jazz. We were always trying to cover lifestyle issues. So if you liked jazz back in the beginning of the millennium, you probably liked Single Malt Scott, because we would quiz our readers. You liked taking cruises. You probably drove a luxury car. You definitely made six figures. So we would write about like cigars or whatever else, because not as a big thing, but as a little thing, because we were trying to, be a bigger part of our readers' lives. For me, the gaming media shouldn't just cover gaming, it can cover issues about social justice. And if it does it the right way, it'll be a great debate among its readers. Not a shouting match, but a debate. But there are other issues it could cover. I don't know enough about your community, but I mean the clothes you wear, other things that you do, or it can be covered. You can't cover that other stuff if you can't cover the basic stuff without your readers doubting you. So it's actually a good business move. If you're just going to talk pure dollars and cents, for the biggest gaming sites to lock down the basics and do it better so they can go make more money because their readers trust them to read stuff that's kind of adjacent to gaming. So I don't understand the business end of some of the shit that's been going on, much less the ethical end.
Sure. Now, one of my questions, you said that you're now interested in helping games journalism. Has there been any indication from any of these sites that they want help, that they'll take help?
No. I've talked to a couple reporters, but they're not decision makers. Stephen Totila's been on vacation. I don't know what he thinks of me at this point. We've had some good conversations. I still think the guy's cool, but he could hate my fucking guts. I don't know. But I don't need their help. I mean, we can do things to help gaming journalism even if they don't want to cooperate initially. So, for instance, usually when you run an awards program, the media wants to participate. They will send in entries. They'll pay an entry fee. I have a feeling if we start a gaming journalism award, given everything that's happened, this thing might be so raw that they don't want to cooperate. The other way to give an award is you just give an award. You bestow it. You declare something to be so. So if SPJ can figure out a way to fairly do that, obviously shouldn't just be like one dude saying you're the best. We have to come up with some metric that the gaming readership would say, okay, that's cool. Sort of like AirPlay. I mean, for everyone who hates it, at least I got some comments like, okay, I don't like what you're doing, but it looks like you're trying to be fair. The appearance of a conflict of interest. If we could set up an award and just do it first, and then it gets some traction and people notice it and read it and tweet about it, then maybe the next year the gaming press realizes, you know what, it's better, this was fair, it was done fairly, let's just play along, and SPJ gets to sort of, in the rules of that award, promote ethics. Like if you don't do the ethics right, you don't win the award. So that's something that we can do. I don't have to be on, a moderator or anything to do that. I can just try to work on it quietly. There are things like that. There's several items like that that can be done, and I have to figure out if they're doable. If they are doable, how many hours does it take? And if it is doable and it's not too onerous on my free time, how many other people do I have to convince to go along, because otherwise it won't be credible? Those are the decisions that are rummaging around my head now. That was a short answer. Sorry about that.
No, that's good.
Gamers do like achievements and trophies.
Yeah, if you do have a trophy, what kind of trophy would it be?
Well, see, this is where I would drag you guys into this equation, and we would come up with something incredibly cool as shit, so that everyone would pay attention to the award. It would be like funny and flashy, but when they looked under the hood, everything would be like firing on all cylinders. It would be like airtight, ethically speaking, and it would be measured. So it would be the kind of thing where people would really pay attention to it, because journalists, they like winning awards, because like I said, it's a mushy science. So if I can win a bunch of awards and I want to get another job someday, that is short. I'm hiring editors, so it's a shorthand to me that, like, oh, I know that award. I didn't know what you were writing at Sheboygan, Wisconsin Times, but I know that place that gave you the award, so I know you must be good. It'd be nice to do that in the gaming press, because I got to figure some of those reporters don't want to be reporters for 40 years. They want to move up. They want to move on. I talked to one Polygon writer that went from Polygon to now she's the tech writer at the LA Times. She didn't want to come to AirPlay, but she was glad to have a new expansive job, right? She covered gaming. She loved her time covering gaming, but now she gets to write about hardware as well and other things. If there are other writers at Polygon that want that same path, more money and a bigger job, Well, having the most prestigious gaming award would look good on your resume. Wouldn't it be cool if we could create the most prestigious gaming award?
I have to admit, myself, when I heard you talking about that, I thought, hey, that's something I'd like to, I could write something for an award. That would be great. That's something I would actually set out to do. Write a piece worthy of an award.
And that's what we would want to see, because a few good kick-ass stories are the ones you can hold up as shining examples of this is how it should be done. It's a lot easier to copy something, to copy the way of doing something once you set the template. So, and in that way it becomes more of a carrot than a stick. I am a journalist, so I don't want to go beat up gaming journalists. I know that, like, if you just stick them all the time, it's not going to work. You got to offer them a carrot. So, if Gamergate and anti-Gamergate are really serious about improving gaming journalism, you can't yell at them all the time. You got to sort of reward them for the good stuff.
Well, a couple of things that were mentioned at AirPlay was some type of ombudsman, or perhaps a media reviewer. Did you hear any feedback on that, or anyone step up to the plate to put those into action?
A couple of people asked me, like, well, how much would I get paid to do that? I haven't thought that far. That's a lot harder to do for one person, but it might be something that could be rotated. Actually, what I would love to see when we were talking about that idea, the most concrete, plausible solution to that would be a retired gaming journalist, someone who loves games, might be retired as a writer, and just works part-time doing whatever. Could do that freelance for someone for a couple $100 an article. Whoever hired that person at a couple $100 would probably make more than that back, at least just initially, for the novelty of it. So even if they just did it for 3 months, if it failed after 3 months, fuck it, it's dead. But I really think it might work. So it's a practical idea. It's so funny because these practical ideas we're talking about were just the kind of ideas that bored the afternoon panel. I had a conversation with Milo. He said, well, this is not interesting to me. I want to talk about big ideas. And I said, well, you're a big idea guy. I am a small detail guy. I'm not that smart. I don't know enough about big ideas. So it occurs to me that maybe these ideas I'm talking about may not be interesting to a lot of people. If they are interested in gaming journalism, maybe. But I don't know if what I'm talking about would work, because I don't know how many Gamergate or just gaming consumers care about anything I'm saying right now.
Well, it's been done before, though.
When? Where?
Kyle Orland.
What happened?
For years, he ran a site, and it was called something like the Gaming Ombudsman. And he would, look at mistakes people made or good work that people made, and he would write about it all the time.
What happened?
He got a job somewhere else and is working. He's the editor of Ars Technica.
Oh, really? No shit.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Maybe I should talk to him, because if it worked and then he just left, it means that the job is still there. There's just not a person to do it.
Sure.
I mean, if he made a living at it, or he made enough to, like...
No, I think he did it just because he wanted to do it.
I need to talk to that dude. I hope he'll email me back.
But I think he said in public before that when he would contact people, they would get the fear in them, because they knew, he was going to be talking about something that they might not like.
Yeah, journalists are never used to that.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I didn't know that stuff. See, I'm learning stuff. I'd love to contact the guy and find out what's going on, and maybe out of my budget next year, it gets replenished because I spent all of it. But I might pay someone to write a couple of them just out of the box to see if anyone wants to take it up, because we'll see if it works.
Sure.
Or maybe we'll start something sooner than that. I don't know, but I don't know if people care enough. I think maybe after Gamergate, maybe they care more than if this guy did it 10 years ago when everyone knew that GameSpot was a shitty magazine when it was a print magazine. That might be different. I don't know, but to me, it's such a loaded topic now. There just doesn't seem to be any shortage of stuff to write about, and there certainly isn't any shortage of comments. If I can write an AirPlay update and get 300 comments, somebody doing that well we'll have a lot of reader engagement.
Yes, I agree.
And that's what it's about. So if they do it and they get 200 comments, and I'm the editor of a gaming, if I'm you, James, and they write about my site, I'm not blowing it off. I'm definitely reading it.
Sure. I mean, we'd put it up. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. One thing I want to chime in here for our viewers is we've had almost no engagement in the chat box for a while, and I think Green and Purple's comment on YouTube saying it's hard to leave a comment when comment section is closed, which it is on a lot of anti-GG stuff, may have been referring to our comment section. If you're referring to our chat for this show, which is on the front page of Game Politics right now, it's working for me, so I did not shut down our chat. I just tested it 3 different ways, and Matthew actually just commented. So if you're having a problem using our chat, it's not because we shut it off. It's because there's some other weird thing going on that I'm not aware of. So I apologize for that if you're trying to.
They're probably listening because there's a lot of information being passed off here.
Yeah, well, I think that specific comment was talking more along the lines of, Anita Sarkeesian. She closes the comments on all of her YouTube videos. She has no comments enabled on her website.
PewDiePie does the same thing, and they usually do that because they just don't want to deal with the comments. It's a lot of vitriol. It's a lot of spam and advertisements and weird things like that, and they don't want to deal with it. But I agree with Michael that that's probably not something you want to do to your news article. To your goofy internet show, it's your goofy internet show. You do what you want. But I agree that disabling comments for news articles is probably not the best way to go unless you have a really good reason for it.
Well, yeah, like the local newspaper here, the Daily Oklahoman, their online website, newsok.com, and they have a tendency to they have comments, but they have a tendency to close the comments on the articles that are guaranteed to get the most comments because they're just that controversial. There's a lot of people who have something to say, and it's just like, why are you closing the comments on these?
Well, okay, but first you got to understand that for a daily newspaper online, they're a family newspaper, so they have high schoolers checking out their high school football team or their lunch menu, and that if it's going to be a lot of like, you're a Nazi cocksucker, and they don't have they have articles, like dozens of articles every day, then they might close the comments at a certain point because no one's going back to those articles anyway, and they don't have to hire someone to go scour it for Nazi cocksucker comments. That is different than in a niche world like gaming, jazz, whatever, or now I'm a financial writer, where an article is still a topic of discussion for people just in that niche. That's different. I can tell you at AirPlay we turned off the comments on the YouTube feed because there was doxing happening in the comments that were flying by. So that was everyone's decision to turn that off. But it wasn't because, oh my God, I don't want to read something. There had to be a larger objective reason for doing it. So I guess if I was a little too flip in my answer, those would be the caveats.
Yeah. If someone's getting doxed in the comments, I think that's, especially if they're live scrolling comments, that's a good reason.
So, Michael, let me ask you, of the student journalists that were there, I assume you talked to them at some point. How did they feel that each panel went?
It's really funny because the pro journalists and the student journalists had slightly different takes, I think. The student journalists, some of them were actually monitoring they were handling our Twitter account. We just set up an SPJ AirPlay Twitter account, and they were stunned. Like, wow, this is a really active community.
They did great, by the way. They were live tweeting, and they were some of their quotes were coming out before they came out on the stream. So I mean, they were great.
No, and that's because they're students, so they know social media. Like they grew up with it. So they're really good and they're journalistic about how they handle Twitter. So the way they handled that Twitter account was how journalists should handle it, but they weren't familiar with Gamergate. Some of them were gamers, they play games, but it's really interesting because I had to keep reminding myself that you can be a really avid gamer and still have no idea what Gamergate is. So the amount of students that I talked to that knew all about games, I mean, during E3 they were not working. Some of them one of them was my intern, and I have 4 employees, 2 of them are avid gamers, and no work got done because they were just streaming it on their computer, pretending to work. And I knew what was going on. But none of them knew much about Gamergate besides the name. So I have to keep reminding myself that I'm not the only dumbass when it comes to Gamergate. There are people totally into games that don't. So the journalism students were really impressed because they just loved the fact that people were involved. Even the stuff that's kind of stupid, to them, it's just amazing that there is a conversation. They got into journalism. They're young and idealistic. The weight of the world hasn't crushed their soul yet. So they love the fact that there's a conversation going on, because that's why you're a journalist, right? If you want to be a broadcaster, it's look at me, I'm pretty, and I'm on TV. If you're the kind of journalist that we're at this event, you feel good about yourself. It puts a lilt in your step just to know that you did something that caused other people to start talking. They were really happy. The pro journalists were really confused. They didn't understand a lot of what was being said. They really wanted to, and they were more practical. They were filtering it through how the hell would I even write about this? So it was interesting watching the 2 different groups talk to each other, because after AirPlay was over, we luckily got back in the building. We had an award ceremony because we were giving out some regular journalism awards, and then there was free rum. So free Miami rum. So then all the journalists were talking, and part of the conversation turned to AirPlay. So it was interesting watching those conversations.
Yeah.
Well, some said that you were in hot water with SPJ because of the bomb threat. I guess they didn't want you to cover such an issue that was obviously going to get bomb threats. Were you in any hot water?
I was for a few minutes, because what happened was, when the bomb threat happened, don't forget, there was another journalism conference going on that also got disrupted. They just didn't I was hoping they would just evacuate the auditorium, because we held Gamergate in an auditorium, and then you had to walk across this breezeway to get to where the rest of in a separate building, where the rest of the journalism conference was going on. We had other bomb threats that were not credible because we had all this security. So we kind of bought ourselves a lot of hours. But they had to evacuate the journalism conference. And one of those events that was going on was a career fair, where there were writers meeting editors to get work.
Oh.
That was interrupted. Then we sponsored this, not just SPJ, there's the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, there's a bunch of other journalism organizations that sponsored the conference. Well, they were telling us initially that they're just shutting the whole place down afterwards, go home. That meant no rum.
Ooh.
And there's nothing, that meant no rum and no awards. They were going to end the awards ceremony, and so we wouldn't get any free food, no free rum, and no awards. Nothing pisses off a journalist more than being hungry, sober, and unrecognized. Luckily, they let us back in on time, and I spent, once we got everyone out of there for AirPlay, as my penance, I spent all of my time turning the room over for the awards ceremony, working with the tech guy to set up the microphones and putting down grip tape. I did whatever I could so that those guys would be happy. But everything else came out okay. So those guys were not too upset. For a while, they were really pissed at me. And then I was worried about SPJ National, because they were hesitant to support this in the first place based on what they had heard. I don't know what all of them think. We got a board meeting next month, but Lynn Walsh is more respected than I am and more normal than me. So she said she had a great time, and that she felt that more journalists, she learned a lot, but she felt like a lot of non-journalists might have been open-minded enough to believe what she was saying, that it wasn't some line of bullshit. So I don't think I'm in too much trouble with them. I don't think I'm in any trouble for hosting the event, but don't forget that my goal is to get some money out of SPJ to go do some of the things that we're talking about, whether it's awards or whatever. So I'm not in any trouble anymore. That thankfully passed. But I want them not only to not hate me, I want them to like the ideas enough that they might actually throw a couple bucks at it.
Now, after AirPlay, did you, when everything was done, did you go home and did you like just wake up a few days ago, or did you sleep the sleep of dream? I mean,
no. So AirPlay was over, and then I had to stick around for the awards ceremony. And I didn't win any awards. I didn't enter, but I'm not going to win any awards. So I stuck around, talked to some other journalists. We talked about some of this stuff. Then we had to break everything down. So I got home, went to sleep, woke up the next day, wrote an update. Then I packed my bags and I flew out to a university where I was training some student journalists, and I just got back last night. So, and I wrote another update one night in the hotel room, and I haven't been able to respond to emails and tweets as much as I'd like. So really, I haven't had a lot of time to digest this, so I'm really interested in what other people think about it and what SPJ should do next.
All right, well, we're coming up on 2 hours here, so any last questions, folks?
Yeah, what is next with you with gaming? Like, what are you're going to go to AirPlay or SPJ and talk to them? But
you said someone gave you a Steam gift card. What are you going to buy?
True.
Yeah, that's actually,
does Steam run on your iMac?
No, this is what's really embarrassing is he goes by Ewok Patrol. He actually flew down on his own and volunteered, and he handed me this gift card at the end of the night where it's like packing everything up. He stuck around to the very bitter end, even after the award ceremony. And he hands me this gift card, and he said, like he's talking to like a 12-year-old, "This is a Steam gift card. Do you know what Steam is?" And I'm like, yes, I know that much. He's like, "We should play video games." So I said, yeah, sure, I'd like to play some other game besides Age of Empires 3 and Call of Duty 4. But, and then he was musing that it would be really fun, because he's got his own group of friends, and it would be really fun just to like murder me over and over and over again. So I said, you know what, that would be fun. That would be the next thing to do, take a break from this and actually play some games. And he said, I bet a lot of other people would like to kill you too. And I said, great. You know what we should do is it should be like a dunk tank, except this one's full of like urine and feces. And it should be like, come kill Koretzky and give $1 to fund our awards program or our ombudsman program or some other way to promote good journalism. Like, well, I'll put it in a separate bank account. I would do it through SPJ so that the accounting would be transparent and public, and we would actually raise money to do some of the things, because it would be easier to go at SPJ. It's always easier. I've gotten other grants from other organizations. It's always easier to get a grant when you want matching money instead of just money. So if I could say, like, hey, a bunch of people splattered my guts for the past week and we have $200, give me another $200 and let me pay a guy to like start a gaming ombudsman thing, or let me take that $400 so we can start a marketing and awards program for ethical gaming journalism. That'd be fun. I mean, getting killed would be fun because there's no expectations. All I have to do is die a lot.
Well, we might even be able to get an ESPN on covering it. It could be the next great esports sensation.
Yeah, I'm sure it would.
All right. Any final questions for Koretzky?
Well, I just have a thought. It's not really a question. You say that you know a lot of people who don't understand Gamergate. You don't understand it, all that stuff. Just don't feel bad, because even those of us who are immersed in Gamergate don't understand Gamergate. So just throwing that out there.
Well, I will say this: I got several emails this week. Again, I haven't gone through all the email, but asking me if I had any regrets, or if would I have done this again. I had a great time. Someone asked me did you ever have a point which you thought it wasn't worth it? And the only time, and actually I would like to say this if you guys don't mind. I know it's at the end of this thing, I'm all tired, but the only regret I had was this whole thing with Oliver Campbell, because it was really weird, and I kind of liked the dude. He showed up at AirPlay.
Yeah.
And not only did he show up, I sent some journalism students to go get some bottled water because we're standing in this oppressive heat outside in Miami summer. He spent his own money to buy water. So it's really funny because on both sides of the street, you see these people start just to drop cases of bottled water. I'm like, who bought that bottled water? I go over there, and it was Oliver buying bottled water for everybody at the thing. And so I took money out of the SPJ budget and paid him back. And when we were debating out in that condemned house, I dragged him up front and said, listen, you should be part of this impromptu panel. I mean, you should be. I didn't want him to drop out of the thing in the first place. That was his decision or the committee's decision. And it's really funny because as I dragged him up there in front of these people that, maybe 40 people, 50 people, he's like, oh, we're going to get into this now? We're going to talk? And he was smiling, joking about it. I'm like, no, we're not. You're going to talk about whatever you need to talk about. This is not about you and me. This is about you. You really are passionate about this topic, whether people agree with you or not. You seem pretty passionate about it. So he was up there, and that guy Aaron Pablone asked a lot of questions, and that was really cool. So I was glad that happened. I wish I had more time to talk to him. I didn't. But that was the only real regret that I had. Everything else was fine. I guess I also believe this, just in general. I take everyone at face value when they tell me that they do something because they care about it. Like, I might disagree with Gamergate or anti-Gamergate on certain points. I don't believe either side when they tell me the other side doesn't believe what they're saying. They're just doing it for an ulterior motive. I believe Anita Sarkeesian and Oliver Campbell both believe strongly in what they're doing. I take them at face value at that. I don't think either of them is lying to achieve some nefarious purpose. And the Gamergate people that I met, even the ones that were a little over the top, I don't regret meeting them. I did learn that the best way to communicate with Gamergate is actually old school, through email. Because I can't tell you how many emails I have that resulted from weird Twitter exchanges, where the email exchange is then, yeah, Koretzky, sorry about all that Twitter shit. You know how that shit is. And then we have a real conversation via email. And then even on the phone, there were times when if I was in commuting to work or whatever, I would set up phone calls with people in Gamergate or anti-Gamergate. And those were always easier because you're talking to someone, you can understand when they're joking. So what I have learned, and I'll tell other journalists, is start the conversation any way you want, finish it on the phone or in person if possible.
All right. I think the last question of the night is the most important question, which comes from Big Perm on Twitter. Michael, who is your waifu?
By the way, Big Perm is awesome. I really like Big Perm.
All right, so yeah, this became, I didn't know what the hell that was until a couple months ago. And then, I forget who it was, I have to look this up. Someone sent me, by email, like several photos. And it was like a quiz. Which one of these women do you identify with? And I had no other information to go. I didn't know what the hell this was.
Who are these people?
So I'm like, I don't know, that chick looks a little like my wife, so I'll pick her. And then the response was like, ah, ha, 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 ha. I guess I picked, I don't know who it was. I have to go back and look. I picked something, and then they explained to me the whole thing. So I picked somebody. It obviously said something deep and foreboding, and I have no idea what it is to this day. So maybe one of the things I can do in the next couple weeks is I try to figure out what game I'm going to play. You guys I can send you that photo, and you can tell me what the hell it means.
And which character you picked says about you personally.
Yeah, I'm into pop psychology. I'd like to know what the hell is going on.
Okay. All right, so that's it for Super Podcast Action Committee. Brad and Michael, thank you both so much for being on our show again.
Thank you.
Always.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep, and to the 60-plus people watching, hi. Sorry the chat system is apparently not convenient or doesn't work. I know it's not the best solution, but it's what we have for now. It does get better. I mean, this setup's better than what we had 50 episodes ago, so we improve slowly. Any suggestions you have for making the show better or easier or more convenient, we are absolutely open to. So, you can send us email at superpackpodcast@gmail.com. But before we sign off, let's plug all our stuff and get out of here. Brad, give us your Twitter stuffs, anything you want to plug.
Sure. I am at Brad_Glasgow. I'm hoping to have an article for you guys next week. That's about it.
Okay. Zachary?
All right. If you want to yell at me for my conspiracy theory about Gamergate and the bomb threats earlier this episode, you can tweet me at EasyKnight. And if you're interested in my game development work, you can follow me at DK_gaming and DivineKnightGaming.com. And if you like the Oklahoma game development scene and want to see what's going on there, check out OK Game Devs on Twitter and OKGameDev.com. And finally, if you like some not-so-serious stuff, check out RustyOutlook.com and Rusty Outlook on Twitter. There you go.
Michael?
I'm going to keep the SPJAirplay.com site up for at least a little while, and I'm probably going to write another update because there's that Huffington Post Gamergate anniversary story, and I might be interesting to write about the behind the scenes for how they're doing that reporting. And I'm going to record something with David Pacman, who is, I know he's covered Gamergate, but he's not Gamergate, so I want to see how, now that I have this new knowledge, I want to see how more mainstream media is going to cover Gamergate, if it's changed at least this journalist's opinion. And you can still reach me at spjairplay@gmail.com. I guess I'll keep that around for a long time because I got to figure out what we're going to do with this gaming awards thing, and I'm still interested in learning stuff.
Okay. James?
Before I plug anything, I just want to say I really thought Lynn Walsh did an excellent job, and she's probably the MVP of AirPlay.
She's the MVP of SPJ too.
Yeah, she was great. She was great. You can catch me on Twitter at jpudge and read my work on GamePolitics.com.
All right.
Nothing flashy.
Yeah. Andrew Eisen here. EISEN is how you spell the last name. Plug the name into YouTube and you'll find all my silly YouTube videos. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Eisen. And my Facebook page is just Andrew Eisen YouTube. So there you go. Thanks for watching Super Podcast Action Committee. We'll be back at you next week with another episode. In the meantime, send us email at superpackpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at superpackpodcast. Still working on the RSS and iTunes stuff, but we are on Facebook, so you can like us there. That's it for us. We are out of here. Have an excellent week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.